Welcome to our small garden in Kent, southeast England. It's good to have your company on this cool but sunny October afternoon. I'm absorbing all the seasonal changes because there is so much to appreciate after our week spent away from home. Returning to the garden, we are greeted by the simple daisy disc of joy that is the face of a sunflower. These are cutting cultivar White Nite. It was an experimental gamble, sowing these in August. I'm happy to see them unfurling. Hoverflies and bees are still busy foraging on long-flowering cosmos cupcake plush. These are the sweet-natured gingery fluff balls called carder bees. And this is one of the UK's biggest, most bumblicious humblebees, a magnificent queen buff-tailed bumblebee. The Crocosmia has burst from bud to flame while we were away. This is cultivar Carmin Brillant with a gorgeous glowing yellow throat within each saturated sunset orange flower. And it's still glowing gorgeously at dusk. Fabulously vibrant autumn leafage of the smoke bush makes me feel as though it has brought out its most colourful bunting just to welcome us home from our week away. Although foliage is fast turning to falling confetti. Unlike the flowers and busy bees, the handsome frog prince in our pool was not exactly offering the warmest greeting on seeing us again. I think he had a slightly offended air that we'd gone away and turned off the pond fountain for 7 days, because this particular amphibian is quite a character and does often love sitting with the flow of water over his skin. Incidentally, the tiny yellow petals floating around the pool have fallen from the bright honey-scented blooms of Mahonia soft caress. Now let's leave our prince to the soft caress of the flowing water. Later, I'll be focusing on another wildlife visitor frequenting our garden this year by creating a decorative homage to autumn, bringing a playful spirit of the outdoors in. We visited Trerice, an ornately gabled Elizabethan manor house in a tranquil valley near Newquay in Cornwall, guarded by 2 16th century crouching granite lions that could be mistaken for a pair of sweetly sentinel Pekingese. The manor was owned for hundreds of years by the powerful Arundel family, with connections to the royal court. Trerice was purchased by the National Trust in 1953, and it came with a tenant called John Elton, whose name, if you Google him for more information, is immediately transposed to Elton John. But there's no connection except that Mr. John Elton was a heritage rock star. He personally paid for high-quality renovations of the house, which amounted to 3 times the expected expenditure. So it's thanks to Mr. John Elton that this historic house is in such well-restored condition. Trerice has interesting furnishings and features, outstanding plaster ceilings, a couple of ghosts, and a stunning Elizabethan-inspired knot garden created in 2014. This takes its geometric design from the impressive plaster ceiling scape inside, which suits the formality and symmetry of the knot garden aesthetic. Elizabethan knot gardens were traditionally located close to the house for appreciation of the layout from upstairs windows, but they were also filled with herbs and scented flowers for closer sensory enjoyment. The Trerice design comprises 800 yew plants in the hedging framework, swathes of intensely silvery English lavender. This is cultivar Silver Mist, which flowers in midsummer and must have looked so romantic with its sea of purple-blue spars. The divine roses are Sweet Child of Mine, a modern shrub rose with a gently spicy fragrance and a nostalgic heritage look, bearing beautiful ivory white repeat flowering blooms, underplanted with perennial oregano. Transporting the indoors out and using an interior feature like a beautiful ceiling to inspire outdoor garden design is an effective way to create a really strong sense of place. This is an idea to take away no matter the age or style of your house and garden, because using a favourite feature from our interiors to spark inspiration in the outside landscape does not only depend on antique or historic elements, it could reflect the influence of interior colour or wallpaper patterns, a much-loved painting or favourite furnishings. It's a way to create a stronger link between house and garden and reinforces the idea of the garden as an extension of the interior living space, regardless of whether your tastes are bold and funky or inspired by works of classical art. From transporting the inside out, in our next chapter I'm back at home on a side quest to bring the outside in. So let's transport ourselves back to Kent for some autumnal decorating. We have a young visitor coming who adores hedgehogs, so I'm going to create autumn-themed decorations to hang over the dining room table, suspended from the tiered chandelier. It will involve maple leaves, or at least a rough approximation of maple leaves, and a parachuting hedgehog gliding down using a leaf. So I'm just roughly sketching out the formative idea, and I'll build on it from here. I have already ripped up some pages from old brochures and magazines so I can create interesting textural collages. For a more natural look, you could collect real fallen leaves for the project, but they last best if they are first placed in wax paper sheets and pressed flat under heavy books for a week. My rough sketch hedgehog does begin life looking like a mouse, but hopefully those distinctive spines will give him a recognisable appearance as the beloved and much treasured species that is our native UK hedgehog. This creation will not be as artistically delightful as hedgehog icons such as Beatrix Potter's Dear Mrs. Tiggywinkle, but hopefully the completed offering will have its own homemade charm and above all help create a sense of fun. The next step is to draw leafage outlines of differing sizes. Scientists have researched the significance of changing colour in autumnal tree canopies, suggesting that the juxtaposition of regular greens against emerging red, orange and yellow creates pleasure and excitement in the human brain, because right from infancy we are predisposed to find forms of visual contrast very appealing. Once the glue has fully dried, I will cut away the overlap to restore the original outline of the leaf. I'm penciling in the lower profile of the leaf before I sketch my parachuting hedgehog so that he hangs down with his paws in the right position to attach to the physical leaf later. First mistake here, I didn't allow the pen enough time to dry and I smudged the hedgehog's nose with the rubber. Oh, blow. Now I'm progressing to the watercolour pencil stage, but my second mistake is stopping for frothy coffee while thinking how cute it is to show you my hedgehog mug, because I lose concentration and then forget to turn the camera back on. If I had done so, I would have captured on film my third mistake, which was thinking the fine liner pen would be waterproof when I used the wet brush to soften the pencil strokes. So Hedgehog ended up with smudged spines and a black eye. But we'll make everything rosy. I'm covering the black eye with white acrylic paint and will reapply the pencil later. While we're waiting for the paint to dry, there are beautiful gardens painted by nature's artistry waiting for us to return to Cornwall. We're heading back to Cornwall, a Celtic county close to my heart, with ancestral links on both sides of my family. We've explored the Knot Garden in the Elizabethan manor of Trerice, inspired by the fine plaster ceiling inside the house. The apple trees are heritage varieties with evocatively poetic names like Cornish gillyflower, Pascoe's pippin, pignose, and Cornish honeypin. There's a summer house where visitors can sit in tranquility and watch visiting wild birds. The asters and Japanese anemones are an important late-season pollen and nectar source for foraging insects. The stylish lanterns of golden clematis are also popular with pollinators. This climber will flower from midsummer to autumn, followed by textural seed heads. These are gathered by birds to line their nests with soft material. This eye-catching beauty is a deciduous plant, climbing 4 meters high and wide, or several more in optimal conditions, given moisture, good drainage and alkaline to neutral soil, preferring full sun to dappled shade. It is Clematis pruning group 3, so stems are cut back to the lowest pair of buds in February or March, which encourages strong flowering later in the year. There are no existing records of the original design and planting of the Elizabethan gardens at Trerice, but many aspects of gardens in general that appeal to Elizabethan high society and royalty have endured across the centuries to modern garden design aesthetics. A legacy from King Henry VIII was the fashion for larger landscapes divided into smaller rooms for privacy in a more intimate space. Aromatic herbs like rosemary and fragrant roses were not only important to make gardens places of sensory pleasure, but were harvested in order to perfume bedchambers and privy rooms, bringing the outdoors in with fragrant sweetness. Groves and woodlands added a naturalistic atmosphere and encouraged avian life for birdsong to delight the Elizabethan ear. Gardens were status symbols as well as a source of produce. Agents and collectors were hired by the powerful and wealthy to purchase garden statuary, bulbs and seeds. Architects, craftsmen, gardeners, horticulturalists and even hydraulic engineers for fountains and water gardens were employed to create beautiful and competitive outdoor spaces. Often these were skilled Dutch and French refugees who emphasised the classical symbolism fashionable in Italian gardens. The gardens at Trerice today offer the theatrical geometric design, the romance, the fruitful bounty and harmony of birdsong and nature, which are all very much in the spirit of Elizabethan garden values. But there is one notable difference in wildlife sensibilities, and it's particularly salient in the context of my little decorative hedgehog. Today, Trerice is a haven for hedgehogs, especially in its wilder areas, but in Elizabethan times, hedgehogs had a bounty on their heads, with a statute reward of 2 pennies per hogshead. They were perceived as egg-stealing vermin. Happily, today, they are the UK's favourite mammal, and there is a national conservation strategy in place to try and boost the numbers of these gorgeous creatures. And now that I've made my own little hedgehog a little more gorgeous himself by covering his accidental black eye, I hope you'll return with me to our autumn decorating at home before we then take a trip 30 miles southwest from Trerice to visit another incredible atmospheric and historic Cornish garden at the Godolphin estate. Our hedgehog is looking smarter, the collage maple leaves are dry, and I've trimmed off the excess paper overlapping the edges to restore sharp definition to the outlines. I've incorporated a mix of saturated and subtle colours, including the all-important green, thinking back to that scientific research suggesting that visual contrast will bring pleasure to the human eye and brain. I had originally intended to repeat the process and stick paper strips from magazines on the back of each leaf, but I've now decided to write out some favourite lines of autumnal poetry, words that evoke all the sensory and poignant qualities of autumnal scenes. But first, I decide to brush a base of antique gold acrylic paint on the back of the cutouts. I commence by painting conscientiously, and then as I realise time is really starting to run out, the application gets messier and messier, which is really false time economy because I will just spend extra minutes clearing up. Once the painted backs are dry, I edge the front of the leaves in gold paint too. A small detail, but it adds an interesting finish to balance the rougher texture of the strips torn from brochures and old magazines. Autumn is very much the creative muse of poets and philosophers because the season is filled with transitory symbolism and fruitful bounty, as well as misty mornings and natural beauty. Here's a literary selection. We're transported to the orchard with 2 lines from Thomas Hardy's work, The Later Autumn. Apples in the grass crunch as we pass. And D.H. Lawrence's evocative scenery, the aspens of autumn, like yellow hair of a tigress brindled with pines. And lines from a letter written by George Eliot in 1841 to her former schoolmistress. Delicious autumn, my very soul is wedded to it, and if I were a bird, I would fly about the earth seeking the successive autumns. As I'm running short of time, I've scanned the hedgehog into the computer and printed out the reverse image of him to stick on the back. I'm penciling in a blue sky surround, and this time I'll be taking care with the wet blending brush not to smudge the lines of the non-waterproof black pen. The next essential step is using miniature pegs to fix the hedgehog and leaves in place to the gold twine. The beauty of using clips is that one can easily rearrange the composition until satisfied. This is an evolving creative process, and as you see, I ultimately decide to have the hedgehog parachuting down from 2 leaves rather than 1. Another advantage with clips is that should your young visitor be keen to take the hedgehog home when they leave, their wish can be easily granted. But I hope the mobile also has enough autumnal charm for grown-up guests to enjoy it too. The Godolphin estate was the seat of the Earls of Godolphin and Dukes of Leeds. The fine historic house has undergone centuries of remodelling since Tudor times. The mining of surrounding land rich in tin and copper brought wealth, as did the Godolphin spirit of recycling. In their dining room, the carved ceiling and decorative panelling were salvaged in the 1520s from a Portuguese vessel that sunk off the Cornish coast, while their treasure chests, retrieved from the same Portuguese shipwreck, were ostensibly retained for safekeeping from looters, much to the displeasure of the King of Portugal. The oldest garden compartments date to Tudor times, some of the best preserved Tudor garden layouts in England today. As we walked the grounds at the start of October, they were full of charm and atmosphere. Perennial Helianthus are always a sunny beacon in the late season garden, alive with bounty-seeking bumblebees, uplifting the soul with their simple shining sunflower blooms, like a great pile of Portuguese minted gold doubloons. This particular bee was a little nectar tipsy. Oops. The clear salmon-pink loveliness of the star-flowered Hesperantha shines out from the border with captivating beauty. We can't help but pause to fully admire this plant. Hesperantha is a semi-aquatic rhizomatous perennial hailing from South Africa and neighbouring regions, where it grows along streams, wet seeps and marshes. It thrives in the mild, damp Cornish climate. Here, it has long been cultivated on a commercial scale in the cut flower industry, becoming known as the Cornish river lily. There are many different varieties in white, a spectrum of pinks, and intense reds. I'm not sure of this particular cultivar. It may be the variety known as Salmon Charm, which would be a truly fitting title. I'd love to introduce this salmon charmer to our garden at home. Back in our plot in Kent with the lovely Hesperantha from Godolphin Garden fresh in our minds, we returned to find there were some unexpected salmon-pink splashes in the late season container tapestry beneath my favourite dahlia, Lou Farman, looking most harmonious together. This is the delightful Shirley Poppy cultivar called Angel's Choir, which opens to double and semi-double blooms in a wide spectrum of pink shades. These salmon petals look particularly impactful in the glow of low autumn light. There are plenty of buds still to open, and the unfurling petals are gently ruffled in tissue paper perfection, some of which do not escape being nibbled by snails. These tiny mollusks are a particular presence at the moment. There are dozens of them tucking themselves snugly between petals in flower heads everywhere. Any posies I cut to bring indoors have to be inspected so that the little creatures can first be removed. I'm all for bringing the outdoors in, just not the kind of outdoors that leaves trails across the kitchen countertop like silvery works of modern art. Salvia Phyllis Fancy is the very last salvia to begin flowering in our garden. Understatedly elegant, with long racemes of soft, downy, tubular white flowers suffused with a lilac glow held in paper-folded purple calyces. The blooms are beloved by bumblebees and other bounty-seeking pollinators. This autumn we've kept our container-grown perennial close to the solar radiation from the warm brick wall of the house, as last year she was in a more exposed position and an unexpected early frost on just one single night destroyed her blooms far too soon, and this time we want to extend the pleasure of enjoying her pretty flowers. A warm and heartfelt thank you for joining us this abundant October on a tour of our mid-autumn garden and atmospheric historic spaces in the county of Cornwall. We hope you are enjoying a bountiful and beautiful season, and until next time, dear flower-loving friends and hedgehog appreciators and bumblebee devotees, we wish you all flowerful times and nature-soothed minds. The hedgehog into a ball was curled to hide autumn's secrets from the wintry world.